Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Ayşe Süberker. It was a daring raid to take out the world's most wanted man. The leader of Daesh, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who was hiding out in Syria's northwest province of Idlib, has been killed in a U.S. military operation. Thanking a host of countries for providing help in the mission, U.S. President Donald Trump said Turkey was terrific and knew U.S. forces were closing in on al-Baghdadi. For his part, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan welcomed news of the terrorist leader's death, calling it a turning point in the fight against terrorism. Being one of the main targets of Daesh, Turkish police were also quick to act. They arrested dozens of suspected Daesh members across Turkey following the terror leader's death. Police also broke up alleged cells that were suspected of targeting Turkey's Republic Day celebrations on October 29. So, how will the terror leader's death change the fight against terrorism and the war in Syria? And to answer that, joining me now is Yusuf Alabarda, who is a military analyst and a retired colonel in the Turkish Armed Forces, and Borzou Daragahi, who is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, specializing on the Middle East. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you here. So the world's most wanted man is dead. Borzou, what's next?
Well, we are already seeing what's next. ISIS has named a successor, as well as a new spokesman. Spokesman was also killed in a subsequent raid. And they're regrouping. They're asking those who performed bay'ah, who gave oaths of loyalty to Baghdadi, to now give oaths of loyalty to the new leader. There's an attempt at regrouping. And there are also signs of anger among the ISIS ranks towards the U.S., towards the West. Probably the way that President Donald Trump described the killing of him dying like an animal, whimpering like a dog, it probably wasn't so wise in that it kind of riles people up. It was rather provocative and gratuitous.
So his death actually did not deter his supporters, but emboldened them in a way?
I think it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt, definitely. It's a blow to ISIS. Yes, this guy who was this big figurehead, who was this, he was the caliph, he was the leader, is gone. He's dead. I mentioned the pain of having to re-ask people to do loyalty oaths. There's other logistical and informational things that they have to do. This hurts them. It harms their kind of illusion of infallibility, and it's just another blow. But definitely, ISIS is regrouping. It's not gone.
Was this al-Baghdadi was an operational leader, or because he was constantly on the run? So he was kind of a symbolic leader when compared to Ottoman Empire.
ISIS was created primarily by former Baathists in Iraq.
Yes.
They used him. And they used this whole this scheme of the caliphate to regain power and regain influence after they completely lost it. And to a large extent, he was a dupe of those senior Iraqi officials who are part of the Shura Council, the advisory council, 8 men who really runs ISIS and who are really the brains behind the operational day-to-day operations of the group.
So some Western media reports were speculating that Turkey may have known Baghdadi's whereabouts, but didn't actually help act. How is this possible? And tell us about Turkey's fight against Daesh.
Yeah, Turkey is the only country who is fighting against Daesh with its infantry forces on the ground. There are more than 80 countries at the anti-Daesh coalition. All of them is just giving an air raid to the Daesh positions inside Syria and Iraq. But Turkey is the only country who fought against Daesh, and almost 3,000 Daesh terrorist members has been neutralized in the Euphrates Shield operation. We know that. And we know that Turkey is the biggest victim of the Daesh terrorist activities inside Ankara.
People died.
Has been killed by the terrorist attacks. So such kind of baseless claims does not reflect the truth. But what I can say that Turkey has captured the chief advisor of the Daesh leader of Baghdadi, And after questioning him, he informed all his allies and also sent him back to the Iraqi forces and shared all those information with the West.
There are a lot of gray areas in this with regard to this operation, but Borzo, tell us about how it is possible for a man like Baghdadi to travel from Iraq to Syria and end up in one of the most contentious areas in the world, like Idlib.
Yeah, it is sort of enemy territory for Baghdadi.
Yes.
Idlib is controlled by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, an al-Qaeda spin-off that is an enemy of ISIS. I'm not exactly sure, but I imagine that you're talking about a very lawless environment, a very barren, sparsely populated desert environment where there's people roaming around this area who are not under any kind of government control. You pay bribes to get past checkpoints. When you get to a really hard checkpoint, maybe you get out of the car, you go on foot, you go by animal, you wear some sort of simple disguise, and that's how I would imagine it. This is
maybe he paid some protection money.
Exactly. But look, think about this. This was a sparsely populated area even before Syria's troubles and before the troubles in northern Iraq. Think about the number of people who left afterward over the last 8 years. So there's not a lot of population here.
Yeah,
there's a lot of empty spaces when you talk about northern Iraq and northern Syria, a lot of hostile terrain and so on, a lot of drought-stricken agricultural lands where you can just sneak past in the fields.
So, Yusuf, what do you make? I mean, how do you think he managed to survive, as just Borzo said, in a hostile area? Because they're talking about a couple of months.
Yeah, and the most important issue, there is a power vacuum, and we know that Iraq and most of Syria is a failed state. For this reason, we shouldn't imagine that this is a European country and there is a huge intelligence inside Syria, and there are also legitimate forces who is checkpointing and controlling everything. That is not true. That's a failed state, the Syria. And the reason why Daesh became so powerful is because of that power vacuum. For this reason, moving al-Baghdadi from one point to another is not a big problem inside Syria. So he may move from the Raqqa area to Deir ez-Zor, from Deir ez-Zor to the Idlib area. That is not a very
it's
big,
not that hard.
That is not an issue that we should discuss this issue.
As we mentioned, power vacuum, Borzo, do you believe that his killing will give Russians and the Assad regime just a convenient excuse to crush Idlib?
Well, I mean, I don't think that they needed it.
Why?
I think that they were doing it anyway. How much more ferocious and violent and extreme can they be than bombing hospitals and schools and marketplaces? So I don't think that I don't think it'll make much of a difference operationally. They bomb what they can. They bomb constantly. Human rights organizations have documented this in the West. The UN has documented this. They target hospitals. They target medical workers. So what more excuse do they need?
But Idlib remains to be a problem both for Russia.
They have a lack of ground forces. The Shia militias, the Iranian-backed Shia militias that supported Bashar al-Assad in his taking of central Syria declined to take part in this. They don't see it as part of their battle.
There was also another aspect after the killing of Baghdadi. Yusuf, why do you think the YPG supporters and affiliates were so swift in trying to claim that they were crucial in the killing of Baghdadi?
Because they want to instrumentalize the killing of Baghdadi for their own purposes. For this reason, they say that they had very important role for getting some critical information where he was living, and also some very important and credible media outlets inside United States already said that YPG forces stolen the boxer shorts of the Baghdadi before killing. So to some degree that is a little bit ridiculous, but in order to instrumentalize and to sell your position to the West, you need to do that. For this reason...
Do you think they're convincing in this regard? Because the U.S. is already feeling...
For some degree, yes, because everyone believes that the YPG is the only force that is fighting against Daesh. But no one wants to learn the truth that the fight against Daesh on the ground started with the Euphrates Shield operation, which the Turkish military conducted 2 years ago. For this reason, yes, there are some media outlets who is creating huge perception, especially on the mindsets of the people who is living in the West. But we should understand...
But it seems to be working.
Yeah, to some degree, yes. But what we should know that The power vacuum who creates the Daesh and makes it very efficient inside the Syria area is because of the all kind of terror organizations, including the YPG forces also. So in order to fight against Daesh, we should clear all this area and create a non-failed state in those lands. I will say something. When you take a look at to the map of Syria, there are all kind of colors. It's like a rainbow. But now there is no black color. It means that there is no Daesh. So if Turkey
No Daesh?
No Daesh now, as a territory control, I mean. There is Daesh under the ground now, but Daesh has no land who is controlling inside Iraq, inside Syria. When you take a look at 2 years ago, it was controlling as big as Britain itself. For this reason, if no one wants really no terrorism in those lands, they should contribute to clear the power vacuum in this area. When you take a look at to the facilities of what Turkey is doing in this area, operating schools, giving health care, hospitals, and 2 weeks ago they opened 2 universities in this area. If you facilitate such kind of issues in this area, probably this is the best tool that you can fight with Daesh.
So, Borzu, what do you think of Daesh's future? Will it re-emerge stronger than before?
I don't know
or
about
it will
stronger than
just-
before, but I think that the fundamental problems are still there in the Arab world. The alienation, the corruption, you see protests today, massive protests today in Baghdad,
Yes.
in Beirut, in Algiers. You see trouble in Egypt. You see discontent everywhere. You see a corrupt elderly elite lording over young people wanting better lives everywhere. And in addition to that, you have these big, huge security vacuums. This is the ideal scenario for jihadi groups, whether it's ISIS or Al-Qaeda or the next
They'll
iteration
just capitalize
of ISIS.
on this situation
To
and power
capitalize. I
vacuum.
will say one thing, though. I think that, in terms of the YPG, they did fight against ISIS in Kobani. That was a tough, tough fight. And through that process of fighting against ISIS in Kobani, with Turkish help at that point, they developed a formula. We fight against ISIS. We get legitimacy in the West, and we get territory for our self-rule region. And so that formula is exactly what they're doing, and that is why they were so adamant and so assertive and so early in claiming a hand in the fight against in the killing of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, but also in terms of their fierce opposition to ISIS, because they're a Marxist-rooted group versus a Islamist-rooted group. There is an existential conflict between those two entities.
Yes, exactly. Creating one terror organization after another. Gentlemen, we're out of time. Thank you very much for joining
You're
me
welcome.
on Straight Talk. News of al-Baghdadi's death was a rare moment in recent memory that brought the U.S. and Turkey together. But just a few days later, the Democratic-led House, already critical of President Trump's Syria policy, dashed any hope of rebuilding trust between Washington and Ankara. U.S. representatives voted to recognize the events that took place during the collapse of the Ottoman Empire in the First World War as genocide. Turkey vehemently opposes that accusation. The timing of that non-binding resolution was no coincidence. The vote coincided with the approval of sanctions against Turkey. It was in response to Operation Peace Spring, which successfully established a terror-free zone in northern Syria. Deeply frustrated at U.S. President Trump's recent policy in Syria, which helped pave the way for creating that terror-free zone, House Democrats took to the floor to publicly rebuke Turkey. But the Turkish government was quick to hit back.
The timing of this resolution is questionable. It is non-binding, but that does not mean that we will not react. We have already given our reaction. We all know the reason behind this. It's because Turkey's military operation in Syria has foiled the game of some countries.
So just how suspicious was the timing of this vote, and what effect will this have on relations between the U.S. and Turkey? And joining me now in the studio is Onur Erim, who is an analyst specializing on Turkey-U.S. relations, and from Vienna, We have Klaus Jürgens, who is a political analyst and a contributor at Daily Sabah. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you here. Klaus, I want to start with you. Could this move by the U.S. House create another diplomatic crisis between Turkey and the U.S.?
Hello, thank you for having me. Yes, indeed. I think it happened at the wrong time, the worst of all times. First of all, it was always wrong. We should remember that the initiator of infamous Resolution 296, the Right Honourable Mr. Schiff, he was working for 19 years to get this motion through the House. And previous US presidents simply did not do it.
Yes.
Donald Trump, the president, mentioned in 2017, well, he has a certain inkling about it. It is definitely totally ludicrous in time and wrong in any case. Yes, I think it will lead to a hopefully short-lived deterioration of bilateral talks, not from the Turkish side, but Turkey is simply making a point for many, many years, decades. Turkey has said, we are not against discussing this issue, but please remember there were Turkish victims as well. The numbers are highly exaggerated, and why not set up a new impartial historian commission instead of leaving it to the floor of the politicians? But yes,
we see the Armenian side has
it.
always refrained from opening the archives. This is Turkey has been saying that let's open the archives and let's historians decide on that. But Onur, it used to be a seasonal maneuver taking place in April. Can you talk about the timing of this vote? It also coincided with the sanctions bill against Turkey's Operation Peace Spring, and these two decisions were taken on Turkey's Republic Day. So how significant is it?
It is. I think there was only one other time that this trying to pass this resolution did not fall on April 24th, as the Armenian diaspora always tried to do. Yes, it's definitely not a coincidence that these two bills were on the House floor at the same time, and it's no coincidence that it fell on October 29th, Turkey's Republic Day.
So is this an insult to Turkey?
It absolutely is. It's uncalled for, especially on the so-called Armenian genocide resolution. It's ludicrous to even talk about what's inside that or what it entails. I believe there is not one single credible historian in the world that is not discussing at least the both sides of this issue. It's not like a one-sided thing, as the Armenian diaspora is trying to push. What I can't figure out, to be honest with you, is whether this happened with the help or with the push of President Trump, or it happened, despite him. So we'll see. And we'll see, because there's a huge difference. This may not, because this is such a big and a hurtful move from a so-called NATO ally, from a so-called strategic partner. I mean, you don't do this to your worst enemy. It's one of those things.
I want to get back to you, Klaus. Is the House, do you believe, manipulating the events of the past to stand against both Trump and Erdogan? Because it seems that the two leaders have got what they wanted from the Syrian conflict. What do you make of it?
I would not entirely buy into the argument that the events as unfolding in Syria only led to the passing of Resolution 296. As I've mentioned before, it was 19 years in the making, perhaps even longer. It only reinvigorated it. Yes, indeed, President Trump says America first, let's bring our boys back home, albeit step by step. And President Erdogan rightly said, we want to have a safe zone to stop terror threats from reaching our soils, but most and much more importantly, often overlooked in Western media, to create a safe haven, a peaceful place one more time for up to 2 million displaced men, women, and families. Now, you can argue both men have gotten something out of it, but I think I was in touch since Tuesday very closely with members of the Turkish diaspora and people back home, and they said the only thing this Resolution 296 will actually achieve is that the support for President Erdogan cross-party will be even bigger. The country, Turkey, will unite against these accusations and simply will say it is null and void, same as the foreign minister has already said.
Because, Klaus, polls indicate 90% of Turks don't recognize the events as genocide, and 4 parties out of 5 in parliament and 90% of voters support the Syrian operation. But there was a statement from Democratic House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Elliot Engel of New York. He spoke after resolutions passed the House. Let me read it to you. It's interesting. President Trump has let Erdogan off scot-free for a heinous assault that is destabilizing the region and threatening international security. President Trump and President Erdogan are responsible for the catastrophe in northeast Syria. They both must be held accountable. So, Onur, what do you make of this statement? Do they act on vengeance or something?
It may be. As I said,
what is the mood in the US?
I was very cautious as to how to evaluate this passing of this resolution, especially on the 2 of them on the same day and on October 29th. Because, as I said, I'm still keeping my reserve if Trump had anything to do with this. He probably did not, but let's keep a reserve. But on the other side, we have, first of all, besides all these issues, we have a major war between Congress and Trump. Not just the Democratic side, both sides of the aisle. That's number one. Number two, we have a major disagreement with the Congress and Trump on Syria.
Yes.
And then, forget about everything else. They're in an election year, and there is what seems to
Trump
be now...
Trump is dealing with this impeachment.
Exactly. That impeachment thing is... if you asked me this about 6 months ago, I would have said, you know what, I don't think that will lead to an impeachment or a possible impeachment. But now, day after day, with new testimonies coming out, it seems more close to reality than it's not. So there's a lot of issues that may not necessarily be concerning Turkey.
But tell me this, is this a sign that when it comes to Turkey, President Trump has no control or power whatsoever on the House Republicans?
First of all, I don't think Trump has any power on Republicans at all, period, not just on this issue. Now, when this bill or resolution goes down its path, Trump does have few things that he could do to sway votes the other way or to kill it altogether. He has this power. But what will that cost to him, and whether or not he will actually want to incur that cost is a different story. So we'll see. We'll see down the path. This all seems to me, to be honest with you, I know it's a very, maybe a different way of looking at things, but I'm thinking all this is happening not just so much about Turkey. This is actually a war between the Congress and Trump. And right now, we are very, very popular in many ways in the U.S. in the Capitol Hill. Yes. So we're actually, our name is in the middle, being tossed around on different issues.
Unfortunately. So, Klaus, what's next? You think for the two-country relations? Is there a room for the two countries to mend their relations, or we just have to wait and see?
Well, I hope there will be a way to mend the relations. As people say, 24 hours are a long time in politics. I think, yes, I fully agree with my esteemed colleague that basically the House wanted to rather punish President Trump instead of directly President Erdogan. It's an internal fight, and elections are coming up. It's a little bit like what we see Brexit time now in the United Kingdom. We should not forget that the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, decided to move the motion. And same like John Bercow in the United Kingdom, she could have had the power actually to disallow it, although the House Rules Committee said we want to push it. Now, this was unfortunately a given fact once the House Rule Committee has said, yes, we want to push it, and then on Tuesday, things developed. I think both sides will come together again over time, but there is a cautious warning. I think this time the Republic of Turkey and the Turkish people and the foreign minister and the president, they should be very careful and cautious, not after 1 week or two say, let's just forget about it. It's only a political decision, legally non-binding, completely different than what happened in Switzerland some time ago with the denial as a punishable offense. It is a political decision. Now you can say just shrug it off and forget about it. But I think this would be wrong. I think it should be discussed openly and frankly between both governments to make sure perhaps, I'm not saying can it be revoked, that would be very difficult, but can it be sidelined? I think it, indeed, unfortunately, it has put a dent into bilateral relations exactly at the moment where both sides should cooperate ever more closely.
All right.
Yes, very unfortunately.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, gentlemen. Klaus, thank you for joining us from Vienna, and Onur, thank you for joining me on the set. I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you.
And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Ayşe Süberker. If you've got any comments, do share them with us on Twitter with the hashtag Straight Talk. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.